My name is Naomi Stead. I am the head of the Department of Architecture at Monash University, and I'm here with Lee-Anne Khor, my colleague. Why don't we start? What can you tell us about yourself to begin with, Lee-Anne?
So I'm a senior lecturer at Monash. I work a lot in the Monash Urban Lab. A lot of my research oscillates around the kind of suburbs in general. So the middle suburban typical condition of Melbourne that, a lot of us live in, and looking at how the future types of transformations in those areas can make Melbourne a better place.
Great. Tell me, where will students possibly encounter you in the coming semester, or indeed in the coming years in the teaching program?
This coming semester, I'll be teaching a second year studio. That will probably revolve around the suburbs, surprise, but probably more in the industrial side of things at this stage. So looking at the reuse of industrial areas and what the future of manufacturing and those sorts of things are, which is timely in terms of the post-COVID world. And I'm currently coordinating master's studies units and taking on the studies units in the bachelor's. So you might not have me in the classroom, but you'll probably have lots of emails coming from me saying what all of the different offerings are for the studies units.
So what is it that you find particularly interesting about the suburbs?
Mainly they're kind of daggy. So I think that historically architecture hasn't given the suburbs a hell of a lot of attention compared to other places. And so I think my interest is more what design can contribute. And of course, there have been architects that have operated in the suburbs over time, but I think that the suburbs, in general, volume housing is more like 95% of the fabric out there, and so probably needs a little bit of design love, really.
Did you grow up in the suburbs?
I did. I grew up in a place called Box Hill South, so lived in a old weatherboard house that was our family home, and
because I suppose the reason why I ask is I grew up in the suburbs as well, in the outer suburbs of Adelaide, actually. For that reason, I feel pretty ambivalent about the suburbs, because I kind of hated it a little bit when I was growing up. Like monotonous, everything the same. But now I can see some of the benefits.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I was the same, everybody growing up, as soon as you're old enough, you get your license and you're out, kind of a thing, because it was boring and dull and all of those sorts of things. And I think for a long time they were, just because there wasn't many places to go in the suburbs. You were tending to go into the city, or you were tending to go to school, or whatever it was. I think these days the suburbs are a different beast. There are places to go, and the activity and the intensity is shifting to other locations. So I think that, it's a sort of a different thing to when we grew up, I would say.
Yeah, I was teaching Monash students a couple of years back, and what they found extremely irritating was when urban theorists have been very sneering about the suburbs. Yeah. There's a strand of architectural snobbery which really looks down on the suburbs as being a kind of wasteland of non-architecture.
It is absolutely flawed, don't get me wrong. I think that there is lots of work to do. But I do think there is an element of snobbery or a little bit of, we're just not going to look at that, maybe. Do you know what I mean? It's uninteresting to us. As a sort of a byproduct, the suburbs are not very well known. We don't understand them spatially. We don't understand how diverse they actually are. Or, we know our neighbourhood, but the neighbourhood our friends live in can be completely different. Often it's condemned so much that it's poor quality, it's dispersed, it's car dependent, all of these things, which are true, but there are also some really great things to work with which are different to the city. And in the end, in a place like Melbourne, we all know that there's a lot of towers going up in the city, but we also kind of know the models for that sort of stuff. I think that the suburbs are a little less charted. And so, it's sort of a little bit of an open-ended question about what it could be, which I think is fun.
Yeah, well, and certainly I noticed in some of the design studios that you've been teaching in recent years, there's been a really interesting focus on systems and networks. So looking at infrastructures and supply chains and the various networks which kind of feed and service the suburbs, and how they disperse differently, out there than they are in dense, urban environments. And I would say that's super valuable for architects and architecture students to be able to think in terms of, where the trucks go to deliver the stuff to the warehouse, which then gets dispersed to the blah, 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 blah. Is that, I mean,
Yeah.
is that something you're interested in as well?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think that if we make comparisons where, you know, even sort of tram systems, let's say, are less frequent in the suburbs compared to the inner areas. And so we have to find kind of clever ways of dealing with what we don't have out there, compared to what we kind of rely on in the city to support intensity and different types of mixes of use and all of that kind of stuff. And so working with those sorts of patterns and systems at a sort of very large scale, which is all about, you know, both the kind of the form of the suburbs, but how we use and operate the suburbs. And working down to the kind of design of a building and how that then can have an influence back up into those systems is the sort of, the negotiations across scales, I think, is the sort of thing that I try to teach with. Sometimes architects get relegated to the kind of site and the building, and that's their job, which it is, and it's a very important job, so don't get me wrong. But I think by looking at systems and looking at networks, we then can have a conversation with planners, we can have a conversation with economists, we can have a conversation with social scientists, historians, you know, a whole range of things, which I think that type of design thinking or spatial thinking is often kind of overlooked in the research of the suburbs particularly. So I think there's a huge role that we can play, but I think that we've got to practice that language in a sense.
And usually you'd be just getting ready to take a group of students to Prato now, which unfortunately, sadly, is not happening this year. But what can you tell us about that?
Prato is brilliant. So Prato is a town in Italy just above Florence. And it's in a kind of an old city. So it's a walled city, and Monash has a centre there. So it's like a little campus, and it's an absolutely brilliant place to be able to go and discover different types of urbanisms. Ultimately, Europe has a very different makeup to Australia. And the kinds of things that we've done in the previous year anyway is then go and visit these types of industrial reuse or where design has played a role in the change and transformation of industrial buildings. And so I think next year it'll be back on the books, and we'll do it bigger and better, and have a collaboration between the interior design students and the third year architecture students, and hopefully look at making some interesting things.
Fantastic. All right. Well, look, thanks, Lee-Anne. That has been super interesting. And I must say you're an excellent interviewee. So thank you very much.
Oh, God, I hate doing these things.